December 15, 2025. We're on the Nectar devotion, Sattvika Bhavs. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvisesis and Nivadi Paskachade Satarane Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Stam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Panchakalpajubhischa Kripasnavya Bhatapati Tanam Pavanavyo Vaishnavebi Namo Namaha. So we're studying the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the nectar ocean of the rasas of devotion, and we're in the Southern Ocean, which looks at the 5 components of rasa, vibhava. Can the host please mute people? Okay. So vibhava, the stimulants, anubhava, the voluntary expressions, sattvika bhava, which we're doing today, the involuntary expressions, vyavitari bhava, the changing emotions, and sthai bhava, the basic connection, all of which are essential to experience rasa. We are in the 3rd wave of the Southern Ocean on sattvika bhava. This is the entire 3rd wave. Chapter 28 of the Nectar of Devotion. So here we have the 5 components of rasa. So sattvika bhava is involuntary expressions when the sthai bhava is stimulated by vibhava and agitated by vyavitari bhava. So summary of chapter 28. When love for Krishna in the heart interacts with the life air in various ways, it produces involuntary symptoms in the body. There are various types and causes of such symptoms, as well as reflections of these symptoms. So this chapter has the definition of sattvika bhava, the types, the cause, the 8 symptoms, the intensity, and false forms. Okay, definition of sattvika bhava. So here we have, first of all, definition of sattva. This is a definition of sattva. This is not sattva gun. This is not one of the 3 modes of material nature. It's called sattva, but it's not one of the modes. This definition of sattva, sat means what is eternal, what is true, what is real, what is good. Twa means ness, like goodness, truthfulness, existence-ness. So when the heart becomes overwhelmed by ratis, that's one's sthai bhava, one's basic relationship. When the heart becomes by one's basic relationship with Krishna, either directly a primary sthai bhava like friendship, parental, or secondary like wonder or joyful, it produces a state called sattva in the heart. This is a transformation of the heart by rati, not sattva guna. It's like if you feel love for your child, that feeling of love for your child, you can feel it in the heart. Prabhupada calls this existential ecstatic love. And Prabhupada mentions that he's having a hard time finding English equivalents. The word existential is a philosophical term that actually has nothing to do with this. And most likely, Srila Prabhupada chose the word existential because sattva means existence or reality. So existence-ness, and Prabhupada chose the word existential. Again, Prabhupada said that he did not know what English to translate this into, and at that time in English, his editors were not able to help him. So is something an anubhav or a sattvika bhav? And we had this kind of question before. If something comes only from a sattvika, from sattva, it's called a sattvika bhav. If there's a mixture of intelligence, then it becomes an anubhav. Okay. So there's the sattvika bhavs are, okay, I'm going to try to make some breakout rooms here that have only 2 or 3 people. in a room. This is going to be just a 5-minute breakout. Okay. So here we're going to be what's the definition of sattva? What's the definition of a sattvika bhava? What's the definition of sattva in this case? What's the definition of a sattvika bhava? Let me just check who's in the rooms. Okay, only 5 minutes. Only 5 minutes. Discuss with a partner, 2 minutes for each person. What is sattva? What is a sattvika bhav? What is sattva? What is a sattvika bhav? If I'm seeing only one person in a room, I may move you to another place. So now we're going to look at the types of sattvika bhav. So there's snigdha, digdha, and ruksha. Again, I'm going to just mention that Srila Prabhupada himself said that these words are very difficult to translate into English. So snigdha can be translated as soft or moist, digdha mixed, soft and harsh or burnt, and ruksha harsh or dried up. Those English words are really not that particularly helpful. So kind of soft and burnt and harsh, soft, moist, mixed, soft, anyway, difficult. So snigdha is experienced by devotees related to their basic relationship with Krishna, to their staibhav, primary or secondary. Digdha is experienced by devotees, but not directly related to a relationship with Krishna. And ruksha, experienced by devotees who have a semblance of love for Krishna, a rati, a bas. Rati is, again, means staibhav, a bas means a shadow or reflection. Okay, soft arises in a person who has a basic relationship, rati or staibhav, with Krishna. So this person they've developed their basic relationship with Krishna. And the involuntary symptom is connected to that relationship. So, primary, it comes from the basic relationship of neutrality, servitude, friendship, or conjugal. So, someone who has love in a primary relationship, whose symptoms are motivated by that relationship. So, here's an example. Radharani was weaving a garland of kunda flowers. Upon hearing the vibration of Krishna's flute, became stunned. It's primary because it comes from her staibhav of conjugal love. She has a relationship of conjugal love, and this being stunned comes directly from her relationship of conjugal love. Okay? Secondary, it comes from the indirect basic relationships of humor, wonder, chivalry, compassion or lamentation, anger, fear, or horror. So somebody has a primary relationship with Krishna, but the sattvika bhavs come from a secondary basic relationship. Okay? So this is still in the soft category, snigdha. So this is an example of indirect. So when Krishna had been brought to Mathura, Mother Yasoda, being very anxious and angry, began to rebuke the king of Mathura, and her face turned red in anger. So secondary indirect, it's anger, which is a secondary staibhav. So her changing of color wasn't arising from her parental love. It was arising from anger. She has parental love. That's important. She has parental love for Krishna, but her change in color came from anger, not from her parental love. Okay. So here we have somebody has a primary staibhav with Krishna. They have a primary staibhav. They have a neutral servitorship, parental, friendship, conjugal that's stimulated by some vibhava. There's some stimulus, either Krishna or the devotee or Anudipana. This gives rise to the emotions of a secondary sthai or a vyabhichari bhav. This produces sattva. Then the sattvic bhavs manifest. Okay? So this is the process for the snigdha, soft and moist. It's soft and moist. It's coming from one's love. One has love for Krishna. One has love for Krishna in a basic relationship. It's stimulated by a vibhava. It mixes with various emotions, and there's an involuntary result. Okay, now there's mixture of soft and harsh. Someone has a genuine love for Krishna in a basic relationship, but they're overcome by an emotion that's not related to their primary and secondary relationship. That in and of itself is significant. That somebody, a pure devotee who has a rasa with Krishna, can have an emotion coming from something else. But that emotion appears along with genuine love and produces a sattvic bhav. So here we have a digdha sattvic bhav. It's mixed, soft, and harsh. So Mother Yasoda was dreaming that Putana was lying on the courtyard of her house. Now, Putana never lay on the courtyard of her house, so this is a dream. She began to shake. That's a sattvic bhav. Then she thought, oh, I got to find Krishna. Okay, so let's explain that. So she began to shake because of seeing Putana in a dream. So the shaking didn't come from primary. It didn't come from her parental feeling towards Krishna. It didn't come from being afraid for Krishna. It just came from fear. Then she began to look for Krishna. So her genuine love, a fear for Krishna, came along with the sattva bhav. So it's harsh because in the beginning it wasn't connected to her love for Krishna, but soft because then it became connected with her love for Krishna. This is from Srila Jiva Goswami's and Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, by the way. So the secondary rata fear is for Krishna's safety. She did not have fear for Krishna until later. So she had this dream and it produced trembling. That was not initially fear for Krishna, it was just fear. However, she has real love for Krishna always. So she always has love for Krishna. That's why it's mixed, soft, and harsh. She always has love for Krishna, but this fear was not related to her love for Krishna or a fear for Krishna at first. Then it was related to Krishna. So this is called Digdha Sattvika Bhav. So let's look at the difference here. So in the shaking of her body came from the dream, and it didn't come from her prema. So it's mixed, or what Prabhupada calls burnt. And with Snigdha Sattvika Bhav, where Yasoda was angry at Kamsa due to separation from Krishna, came completely from a secondary sthai bhav. It came completely from love, which caused her to change color and choke her voice. Okay, the last category is ruksha, harsh or dried up. These look like sattvika bhavs. These are semblance. They appear in people who don't have rati. They don't have the awakening of a sthai bhav, and somehow they get some astonishment or bliss caused by hearing about the sweet and astonishing Lord. This can also happen when demons in Krishna Lila display these physical responses. They have emotions connected to the Lila, but there's no love. So the emotions are connected to Krishna, but there's no love. There is a connection to Krishna, but there's no love. So here's some examples. Non-devotees are materialistic, but sometimes in connection with devotees, they may have a symptom of ecstasy. Persons absorbed in material enjoyment or desiring liberation, they have shadow or reflective ecstasy, which is described in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.3.44. So they have a shadow or reflection of ecstasy, which causes them to have a sattvika bhav. So Love or rati is the source of all kinds of bliss. If you don't have that rati, then ruksha cannot be the shelter of bliss. This ruksha, this harsh, dried up. You may have a symptom, but it's not actually coming from rati. Okay, so we have snigdha, moist off. People love Krishna, and the emotions come from their loving Krishna. Digdha, mixed. They love Krishna, but the emotions come from something else. And later comes to Krishna. Ruksha, they don't love Krishna. So the emotions are not coming from love for Krishna, but they have something to do with Krishna. But they're not coming from love for Krishna. Okay, so we're going to get into small breakout rooms again. This is going to be a 10-minute breakout room. I'll set this up. And I want you to explain to somebody, these three, explain to each other the, actually, instead of doing it as a breakout room, I just want you to put it in the chat. So every person, so all 25 people who are here, I want to see 25 things in the chat. Explain the three types of sattvic bhavs. So instead of a breakout room, explain the three types of sattvic bhavs in the chat. Everyone, please write it in the chat. Somehow I'm not seeing anything in the chat. If everyone could please write in the chat the three types of sattvic bhavs. Use English or Sanskrit words, doesn't matter. Snigdha can also come from a secondary connection. Golekeshwari Harini, define them. Everybody, everyone is here. We've got 26 people here. Okay, Sachi Prema, define them. Okay, good, Asutosh, but we're looking at symptoms like shaking and crying. Okay, good, Prem Prakash. Good, Vedagarbha. Excellent. Vedagarbha is excellent. Okay, one more minute. If everybody could please write something. Shama Bhakti, excellent. Excellent. Kaurangi Gandharvika, excellent. Kaurangi Gandharvika, perfect. Golokeshwari Harini, no, that doesn't arise from a basic connection. The harsh does not arise. Suinwar Raman, yes. Okay, Sachi Prema, you got to get the other one too. Okay, Sarvani, yes. All right, let's go back to this slide. Okay, and Barani, yes. Okay, let's look at this again. So, somehow I lost this. Okay, so Snigdha, you love Krishna, your emotions come from your love for Krishna. That produces something like crying, shaking, hair standing on end. Digdha, you love Krishna, but your emotions don't come from your love for Krishna. That produces something like crying, shaking, hair standing on end. Ruksha, you don't have any love for Krishna. So your emotions can't come from a love for Krishna because you don't have it. But they have something to do with Krishna and produces crying, shaking, hair standing on end, etc. Okay, let's look at the cause. Cause of the 8 sattvic bhavs. So the heart becomes overwhelmed with the bhava related to Krishna. It offers itself to the prana in the body with force. The prana changes. The prana disturbs the body. And the sattvic bhavas become visible in the body. So the prana, the heart becomes overwhelmed with emotion, offers itself to the prana, which takes shelter of earth, water, fire, or ether, and sometimes of air, which is the basis of the prana itself, and moves through the body. This is not so important, and I can't take a question right now, Mahalakshmi. Can you lower your hand, please? Because I can't take that. Thank you. All right. So prana filled with love for Krishna interacting with earth creates someone becoming stunned. If it interacts with water, creates crying. If it interacts with fire, creates perspiration or change of color. With air, hair standing up, faltering voice or trembling. With ether or space, devastation, paralysis of body, speech, and mind. Srila Rupa Goswami gives no information about why the sattva in the heart interacts with different types of prana. And this has nothing to do with the emotional cause. So this is it's a side topic. This is not a very important topic. Okay. What I want you to discuss now in a breakout room, we're going to have a 10-minute breakout room, is the difference between the mind-body connection to material life and in spiritual life. So, we may cry when wind hits our eyes. We may shiver when it's cold. We might yawn when we're tired. And even if you're a pure devotee, your body might shiver when it's cold and you might cry from the wind. At the same time, here we're seeing that these symptoms happen, right? Because the the emotions are mixing with the prana, which disturbs the body in these various ways. So, what's the difference between mind body disturbances from material causes, and what's the difference, or we could even say mind body changes from material rasas? We're crying because there's somebody helps a puppy dog. Uh, you know, our hair stand on end from a sunrise. So what's this difference between material and spiritual? Okay, so I'm going to have, yes, Mahalakshmi, that will be brought up later. So I'm going to set up breakout rooms. Create. I'm going to give you 8 minutes. Okay. We're going to look now at the 8 sattvika bhavs. So paralysis, perspiration, horripilation, or hair standing on end, choked voice, quivering, change of color, tears, and fainting. So think about which ones you're going to want to discuss. That will be after the break. So there's paralysis, stambo, which means a pillar. So emotional causes, ecstatic joy, fearfulness, astonishment, lamentation, or anger. And symptoms, immobility of the action and knowledge acquiring senses. So here's one from joy. The damsels of Raja, after pastimes of laughter, humor, and exchanges of glances, used to follow him with their eyes, and thus they sat down with stunned intelligence and could not finish their household duties. So this could be either a secondary sthai bhav of joy, it's one of the secondary sthai bhavs, or it could be a vyabhichari bhav. Same with this. Fear, because fear is a secondary sthai bhav. Devaki, seeing Krishna surrounded by wrestlers, and she became stunned. She became like a pillar. From astonishment, when Lord Brahma saw the boys and calves as Vishnu forms, when the residents of Vrindavan saw Krishna lifting Govardhan Hill. By the way, I saw one of our ISKCON sannyasi gurus. I saw this happen to him in the Rath Yatra, where for 10 or 15 minutes he became like a pillar and just stiff like a pillar in paralysis. Well, was pretty far out. Paralysis from lamentation. When the demigods saw Krishna entering into Agasura, they became paralyzed, stunned. Anger. When Ashvatthama started to shoot arrows at Krishna, Arjuna, although hasty to respond to his enemy, became motionless for some time because of anger. Again, This anger could be a secondary sthai bhav or a vyabhichari bhav. Okay, perspiration. So emotional causes are joy, fear, or anger. It's amazing, this whole science of Krishna prema, isn't it? Amazing science. Perspiration from joy. Radharani pierced by Cupid upon seeing Krishna and starting to perspire. From fear. Raktak understanding that Krishna was disguised as Abhimanyu after rebuking that false Abhimanyu. So Raktak is in Dasya Bhav, so he has the mood of a servant. And he's not supposed to rebuke his master, but he was rebuking Abhimanyu, Radharani's so-called husband, who was actually Krishna. When he found that it was actually Krishna, he started sweating out of fear. Here's another perspiration out of fear when Garuda watched Indra flood Vrindavan. So Garuda started perspiring out of fear. Standing of the hairs on end, which is also called horripilation, can be caused by astonishment, joy, chivalry, or fear. Those are all secondary sthai bhavs. Symptoms, horripilation, and a sense of a thrill. From astonishment, hair standing on end from astonishment, when Mother Yasoda saw the universe in Krishna's mouth. Horripilation from joy. So the gopis describe this, that the trees of the earth are standing up in joy, either from the touch of Krishna's feet, from just Krishna walking on them, or when Vamandev put his feet on the earth, or when Varaha picked up the earth. Any of these might have been the source of that joy. Standing up with hairs on the end from chivalry. So there was a mock battle among cowherd boys, and Krishna blew his buffalo horn, and Sridama became eager to fight. Chivalry was brought up, and his hair stood on end. Standing of the hairs on end from fear, when Arjuna saw the universal form. Now, of course, this is not connected to his sthai bhav of friendship, and he did not have fear for Krishna. So, put in the chat, what's this? Which one? Stigna, Digna, or Ruksha? Which is this one? Snigdha, Digdha, or Ruksha? So his hair stood on from fear, but he wasn't afraid for Krishna. So it wasn't a secondary sthai bhav. It wasn't coming from his friendship with Krishna, so it wasn't connected to a primary sthai bhav. Digdha, Digdha, excellent. Woo! Digdha, excellent. So this is someone who loves Krishna. He loves Krishna. He has a primary sthai bhav with Krishna, but his hairs were standing on end, was not related to his primary sthai bhav for Krishna. It's not Ruksha because he does love Krishna. Excellent, excellent. Woo-hoo. Okay. Choked voice, where your voice chokes up. Of course, Lord Chaitanya talks about how he's hankering for such symptoms. The emotional causes can be sorrow, astonishment, anger, joy, or fear, which are all secondary sthai bhavs. Those can also be vyabhichari bhavs. Lamentation. So Radharani was lamenting that Krishna was leaving Vrindavan, and her voice was choking when she asked Yasoda to stop Akura. Astonishment after stealing the boys and calves. When Brahma prayed to the Lord, his voice was choking. Anger. When Krishna asked the gopis to go back for their home, they became angry and their voices faltered. Joy. When Akura saw all the Vaikuntha planets resting in the river Jamuna, he was so happy that his voice was choking up. From fear. I said to your servant Patri, give me that flute kept with you. Hearing my words, Patri's a servant. The careless Patri suddenly changed color, and his voice choked up. O Mukunda, because of his inattention, your flute has been lost. So Patri was scared that he lost Krishna's flute, and therefore his voice choked up. Okay, shivering of the body, emotional causes, fear, anger, or joy. Again, those are all secondary sthai bhavs, but they can also be vyavichari bhavs. From fear, when Sankachuta tried to grab Radha, she cried out, "O son of the king of Vraja," and her whole body began to shake out of fear. From anger, when Sahadev heard Shishupal criticizing Krishna, he became angry and he began to shake like a mountain during an earthquake. That's pretty extensive shaking. From joy, when Radharani told the gopis, "Don't let Krishna come anywhere near me," and she started to tremble out of joy. Change of complexion, emotional cause grief or lamentation, anger or fear. By the way, this anger of the women towards Krishna can also be related to embarrassment or shame. So grief, usually white, gray, or black. Anger, and in women towards Krishna, usually due to embarrassment. Can be embarrassment, can be other reasons. Changes to red. Fear changes to black, sometimes white. Sometimes a red color change happens from joy. Okay, here's one from grief. Dear Krishna, due to separation from you, all the denizens of Vrindavan have changed their color. So Narada thought that Vrindavan was a white island. Anger. Angry Balaram is looking red like a newly risen moon, seeing the assistance of Kamsa ready to fight with Krishna. Of course, Krishna and his incarnations also have all of these aspects of rasa. Change from fear. Indra's face turned black when he saw Krishna lifting Govardhan. All right, what kind of sattvika bhav is that? Digdha, snigdha, or ruksha? Digdha, snigdha, or ruksha? Indra. Ruksha, yes. Or we could say, yes, we could say that Indra might have a sthai bhav of servitude, but it was most likely ruksha. Maybe Digda. Definitely not Snigdha. Excellent, excellent, excellent.
But
Okay.
Mataji doesn't Indra have a connection to Krishna?
He might have a Staibhav of Dasyabhav. It probably depends which Indra. So some Indras don't. They're just Sakama devotees without any developed rati. Okay, tears. Emotional causes joy, anger, or grief. Joy causes cool tears. Anger causes warm tears. From joy, Rukmini was criticizing her joyful tears because they made it hard for her to see Krishna. From anger, Satyabhama was crying due to angry affection and Bhima wanting to kill Shishupal. So it's explained that Bhima wanted to kill Shishupal immediately, but because Krishna didn't order him to do so, he became morose with anger. There were hot tears covering his eyes like a thin cloud covering the moon. And Bhima looked very nice with these tears. Tears from grief. When Krishna was teasing Rukmini, that she started crying, and her kajal mixed with the kumkum on her breast, and her voice also choked up. So tears and voice choking. So fainting. Fainting is the absence of action of the body and absence of mental function, which cannot tell the difference between ourselves and others, come from happiness or distress, and results in falling on the ground. So when the gopis were searching for Krishna and all of a sudden he came out from the bushes and creepers, they became stunned and senseless from happiness. They fainted with happiness, fainting in distress. The gopis who were lamenting at the departure of Krishna for Mathura. Okay, we're going to have a break, and our break is going to be, it's going to be a 10-minute 11-minute break. So that will be till 8:05 my time. If you're in Delhi, if you're in Delhi, if you're anywhere in India, it will be till 6:35 p.m. If you're in Malaysia, it will be till 9:05 p.m. So please take a 10, actually 11-minute break. We'll come back 5 minutes after the hour or 5 minutes after the half hour. Please take a real break. Okay, we're going to do some more examples. This we're looking at the Western Ocean, looking at sattvic bhavs related to primary sthai bhavs. We're going to go through this very quickly. In neutrality, there's all of the sthai bhavs except not fainting. Servitude, friendship, and conjugal experience all of the 8 sattvika bhavs. In parental relationship, for the ladies, there's the addition of breast milk flowing spontaneously. Okay, examples from the Northern Ocean with the secondary sthai bhavs. So in wonder, there's paralysis, tear, and hair standing on end. In fear, everything except tears. In disgust or horror, quivering, hair standing on end, and perspiration. In anger, joy or humor, lamentation and compassion. In chivalry, you have all 8. Okay, some examples from Krishna Das Kaviraj's Govinda Lilamrita. This is from verse 615. We have Krishna announces his arrival in the forest by playing his flute. So the non-moving entities began to tremble. The moving entities became paralyzed. The stones became liquid with tears. The colored flowers turned white. Flowers began to ooze tears of sap. The warbling birds became choked up, and the creepers burst forth with new shoots like hairs standing on end. In this way, the Vrindavan forest became glorious with these sattvika bhavs. Okay, we're going to have a 10-minute breakout room. And if you can discuss which of the 8 sattvika bhavs you find most interesting. So we can go all the way back. Where's the list of the sattvika bhavs? Here's the list. So if you can think of which of them you find most interesting, paralysis, perspiration, hair standing on end, choked voice, quivering, change of color, tears, fainting, and any pastime connected with the one that you find most interesting. So which of these do you find most interesting, or do you pick one that you want to talk about and some kind of pastime in related to that? So I'm going to give you a minute to think about that while I'm setting up the breakout room. So if you look at the list, okay, and this is going to be 10 minutes. So which of these you find most interesting, and some pastime or more than one pastime related to that one that you find interesting. We're going to have 10 minutes. Okay, going back to the Southern Ocean, Srila Rupa Goswami is going to be discussing intensity. Okay, how intense these symptoms are. So there's 3 kinds of intensity. One is how long does it last for? The other is how much does it pervade the whole body? And the other is how much does it display its essential nature? So these are 3 types of increase, 3 aspects of increase. Its own nature, how pervasive it is, and how long it lasts. So Except for tears, which are obviously just in the eyes, and choking a voice that's just in the voice, the other sattvic abhavas can spread through many parts of the body. So, how are we going to talk about tears and choking of the voice in terms of pervasiveness? So, they have special features which make them pervasive. So, if the eyes swell and if things become colorful, it's considered pervasive, even though it's still just in the eyes. And choking of the voice, if there's breaking of the voice, weakness of the voice, and fluctuation of tone, that's considered pervasive. So even those two symptoms can have categories of being pervasive. Degrees of intensity: Dumayita, Jwalita, Deepta, and Udipta. So smoky, luminous, brilliant, and very brilliant. How intense it is. So, smoky. There's a slight sattvic above, which can be concealed. Jwalita, luminous, two or three at once, that are very, very difficult to conceal. Deepta, three to five at once, that you just can't conceal. Udipta, really, really brilliant, five or more at once, that you can't conceal. And Sudipta, supremely brilliant. This is intense Udipta, that's in Mahabhav. That's for like Lord Chaitanya, Srimati Radharani. So we don't have the Sudipta. We are going to have the Dumaita, Jwalita, Deepta, and Udipta. Okay, so this one's slight, that can be concealed. One sattvic above that can be concealed. Two or three that you can conceal them, but it's really hard. Three to five at once that you can't conceal. Five or more, remember there's eight altogether, that you can't conceal. And this is, woo! This is, think of Mahaprabhu's exhibitions of ecstasy that were far beyond the ordinary sattvika bhavas. His joint separating, going inside of his body, all these amazing things. Okay. Slight but can be concealed. So this is a sattvika bhava. It usually appears alone, maybe with others, but it just manifests slightly, and the individual can hide it. So even though these are involuntary, even though these are not voluntary, these are involuntary manifestations, they can't be controlled directly. But once they start, if a devotee turns away from the rati, it can be concealed. So the rati, again, produces this sattva in the heart. The rati, the staibhav. This feeling of love for Krishna, primary or secondary. It produces a sattva, produces a love in the heart, which then produces these involuntary symptoms. So the symptoms start, the crying, the shaking, a change of color. If the devotee wants to conceal them, if they're slight, then they kind of turn away from that love for Krishna. They don't meditate on that love for Krishna, and that way they can conceal the sattvic abhaves. So here's an example. When the performer of sacrifice heard the glories of Krishna killing Aghasura, the tips of his eyes filled with a few tears. Hair stood up on his cheeks. In other words, it was not pervasive. A few drops of perspiration appeared on his nose. So this is slight. So it's just a few tears, a few hairs, a few drops of perspiration. It wasn't the full nature of the sattvic abhava, wasn't manifesting. It wasn't pervasive. It was concealable. Okay, luminous. Two or three that can be concealed with difficulty. Krishna, when the sound of your flute comes from the forest and arrives at my ears, my hands begin to shake. So it's not whole body shaking, just hands. I cannot quickly pluck the gunja berries. My eyes become filled with tears, and I cannot immediately recognize the peacock feather because your eyes get blurry when you're crying. My two thighs become paralyzed, but notice none of these are pervasive. So she's not paralyzed altogether, just the thighs are paralyzed. and cannot easily walk one step. So we have three different ones appearing. We have trembling, crying, and paralysis, but they're not pervasive and they can be concealed, but with great difficulty. Now we have brilliant, 3 to 5 at once that cannot be concealed. So when Narada saw Krishna appear before him, he lost control of his body. Due to trembling of his body, for a long time he was unable to play his Veena. So here we have the duration. It's lasting for a longer duration. Due to choke voice, he was unable to recite verses of praise. Because his eyes were filled with tears, he could not see Krishna. So we have three. We have trembling, choke voice, and eyes filled with tears. We have them lasting for a duration and not being able to be concealed. Okay, now we have very brilliant, 5 or more at once, which cannot be concealed. Today, the inhabitants of Goloka are covered in perspiration. So they're covered, it's pervasive, out of separation from Krishna. Their limbs are paralyzed, completely paralyzed. Their bodily hairs are standing on end, all their bodily hairs. In distress, they converse in choked voices. They become faded in complexion, change of color due to the extreme heat of separation. Wet with the profuse flow of tears, so it's not just a few tears, again, it's pervasive. They are now repeatedly fainting out of separation. Okay, so we have perspiration, stunned, hair standing on end, choke voices, change of color, tears, and fainting. We have 7 of the 8 Safika bhavs, and there's no way that they can conceal these. Then we have the Sudipta, when all them appear, and this is not generally seen, this is not seen in the jivas, this extreme state of ecstasy. All right, so Rupa does not give information about the Digda. He gives information just about the Snigdha and the Ruksha. So the Snigdha can have all levels, and the did I get these reversed? Yeah, I got these reversed. I've got to fix the slide, huh? Okay. I reversed the Deepta and Udipta. Sorry about that. So this is the Snigdha can experience all these, and Ruksha, just smoky, occasionally might get to blazing in festivals with devotees. And again, there's nothing, no, Srila Rupa Goswami does not give information about the Digda. So let's say our Stai Bhav hasn't yet manifest. We don't yet have our Rati with Krishna. We can still have this Ruksha at a smoky level and maybe at a blazing level. Okay, what I want us to discuss in breakout groups is why would a devotee want to hide their ecstatic symptoms? So we have these 2 levels, right? We have the smoky where they can be concealed, blazing where they can be concealed with difficulty, these 2 levels where they can be concealed or concealed with difficulty. What are the various circumstances in which a devotee might want to hide their symptoms? And I'd like you to think about both in Krishna's pastimes in this world and in the spiritual world. Why might the devotees want to hide their symptoms? So that's the first thing I want you to discuss. Second thing I want you to discuss is why do you think it happens that devotees have such great symptoms that they can't be hidden? So why would a devotee want to hide their symptoms, either in the material and the spiritual world? And why do you think, or just talk about what these situations where they can't be hidden? Okay, so we're going to have 10 minutes for this in a breakout group. Okay, so why would devotees want to hide their symptoms, either in the material or spiritual worlds? And Just talk about these situations where there's all these symptoms that can't be hidden. Now we're going to look at four types of abhasas. An abhas means something, it looks like the original, but it's not. It can be a shadow or reflection. And this is important to discuss because these sattvic abhavs can happen due to mundane rasas. They can happen to changes in the weather. And we read earlier in the ashraya category about the sadakas, that when one is crying or shivering, these are indicators that love of God is about to awaken for the sadhaka. So we want to distinguish the real and the shadow. So here we have five kinds of abhases. We have a rati abhas. So someone has a shadow or reflection of love. Again, rati is a synonym for staibhav. So a person has a shadow or reflection of a staibhav. Okay, another is sattva abhas. They have a shadow or reflection of a transformed heart. Then nisattva, no changes in the heart. Pratipa, they actually have oppositional emotions. Okay, so pratipa is the worst. They have changes in the body, the sattvic abhavs, because they have emotions against Krishna. Nisattva, they have changes in the body because they're good actors. Sattva abhas, so it appears to be a softened heart by sattva. Maybe somebody in general is soft-hearted, or maybe they're a hard-hearted person, but they're hearing Krishna Katha and their heart is melting. Rati abhas, so this is the same as the Ruksha Sattvic abhav. So the Rati abhas is a Ruksha Sattvic abhav. This is you're associating with a devotee, you're around the devotees, so you don't have Rati, but you're picking up on their Rati. Okay, so first we're going to look at the Ratyabhas, Sattvic abhav. There's a touch of love. There's a little bit, a shadow, a reflection of love. So this is also called the Ruksha Sattvic abhav. There's a superficial attraction to the Lord that's caused by association with an ecstatic devotee. And it's interesting because I was just reading somebody saying that the shadow bhava cannot turn into bhava, but that, oh, yes, I know where I was reading it. The shadow bhava can turn into sadhana. But actually, Srila Prabhupada does say in the Nectar devotion that shadow bhava can turn into real bhava. So here's an example. When a person living in Varanasi, implied the person wanted liberation, glorified the qualities of Hari repeatedly in the assembly of sannyasis, his hair stood on end and tears moistened his cheeks. So even though he didn't have rati, somehow just by talking about Krishna, he started to experience sattvic abhas. One of my good devotee friends told me how when first time she ever chanted Hare Krishna, that she just started crying and crying. And she was like, what is this mantra that's just making me cry? Here's another example of Rati Abhas. The chanting of Hare Krishna is so nice and transcendental that it will eventually melt the hearts of even the persons who are impersonalists. So I don't think my friend was an impersonalist. But the fact is that, you're around devotees, you're around the holy name, even if your Staibhav has not yet manifested. You can get a shadow or reflection of a Staibhav that causes you to exhibit these Sattvic abhas. So it's Rati abhas bhava, Sattvic abhas. Okay, now we're looking at just the Sattvic abhas bhava, Sattvic abhas, Sattvic abhas, Sattvic abhas. Sattva abhas bhava, which results in a Sattvika abhas. So Sattvika is the manifestation, Sattva is the change of heart. So this is someone who's having a reflection or a shadow of a change of heart. So two possibilities. Somebody's naturally materially soft-hearted. They're naturally moved easily by emotions. and they're overcome by some trace of joy or astonishment. Another possibility, someone who materially is not naturally soft-hearted, but they're around the devotees, and so they're affected by the devotees. Okay, so in festivals of chanting, so those whose minds are soft or those whose minds are hard may show these semblances of ecstasy. And we have this happen. We see this. We could take out a Harinam party, people come to a festival, there's some big kirtan going on, and even people whose hearts are not really changing, they get a little, they get a little reflection of a heart change. So this is not as strong as having a reflection of a rati. So you have a reflection of a rati, you have a feeling, some shadow or reflection of some specific attachment to Krishna. So here, there's not that. It's less intense, but you feel some changes in your heart, even though there's no rati. Okay, so here's a sattva abhas bhava, sattvic abhas. So here's another example. When staunch logicians, without any trace of devotional service and without actually understanding the transcendental glories of the Lord, sit down to hear the glories of the Lord, they appear to be melting and shedding tears. There you go. Happen even to just people who are into philosophy. Okay, practice acting. So they don't even have a shadow. There's no shadow or reflection of a attachment to Krishna. There's no shadow or reflection of a soft heart. These are practice actors. Actors can practice. Actually, I look at the news headlines daily, and I just saw something in the news today was saying, how do actors generate emotions? So they're practicing. They're going to practice shaking. They're going to practice crying. There's no emotions going on in their heart at all. There's no love for Krishna. Then you have the pratipa, so enemies of Krishna, they have real emotions, but this is detestable. Their emotions are opposed to Krishna. An example is Kamsa's face appeared like the sun, red from anger, and seeing Krishna in the arena, the wrestler's face turned pale, perspired. Of course, it's any emotions in relation to Krishna, yam, krodha, kama, sahaja, pranayati, biti, are still auspicious for the person. So these false forms are just for the purpose of distinguishing between the real and the false. Okay, so we can have some general discussion in a moment. So we've looked at the definition of sattvic bhavas, the types of sattvic bhavas, the causes of sattvic bhavas, the 8 sattvic bhavas themselves, their intensity and their false forms, and of course, these sattvic bhavas are part of the 5 ingredients that are necessary for there to be rasa. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes where we can have a general discussion. And I'm not sure, I have my settings strange, so which I'll have to fix after the class. So if the other organizers can add and remove spotlights as needed, that would be great. Because if I do it, I'm going to mess things up. So you can, any discussions either by raising your hand or in the chat. Yes, Paneshwari Lakshmi.
My question is that, can you hear me? It says unmute.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, my question, so I guess my understanding now is that these different uh, changes in the body, the Vyabhachari, Satvika, et cetera, they don't necessarily come one after the other, but it's kind of like this, the Rati, rasa is a, it's a complete picture. In other words, it's a
Correct.
whole thing. Because originally I was thinking it goes from this to this to this, like, Vibhava, Anubhava.
No, it can. It can. But yes, it's still a whole thing. And as will be explained later, that at the stage of prema, it's difficult even to make these distinctions between these different. It's like, you've got some banana bread with walnuts in it, and the flavors have mixed. So you may be able to say, oh, here's a walnut, but how are you going to really separate out? It's not so obvious. At up to in bhava, the different elements are appreciated differently, and in prema, it's more like it's a it's a smoothie, it's a drink. Where still you might be able to take out the elements, but there is a science of how they interact with each other and what causes what. Definitely.
But can we say that it's actually it's the entire experience that we
Yes.
experience. I
Rasa
don't,
is the
yes.
entire experience. Rasa
Okay,
is
so
the entire experience of all five of the elements of all five of the bhavas. Yes.
okay. Okay, thank you.
How do you organizers make it side by side like that? I want to know how I can do that next time.
You just add the spotlight, Mataji.
Oh, you just add. Oh, okay, great. Thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, we have in the chat how to soul search in where you are with your spiritual journey and the abhasas. Um, if we're going to talk about the progress of bhakti, usually that's talked about in terms of Shraddha to Prema, or in terms of degrees of meditation, or in terms of purity of chanting, or in terms of faith in the Shastras, or in terms of relationship with devotees. So, and there are some other ways as well. The whole Upadeshamrita could be considered a progress. If we're looking here, we'd be looking at, well, has my Staibhav with Krishna manifested in any way? Do I have this greed, maybe immature greed? Do I have a greed to relate to Krishna in one of these five Staibhavs? So many, many, many devotees in our Hare Krishna movement have had their Staibhav begin to awaken. I've heard devotees say that no one has, and it's like, well, if no one has, then what's the use of our movement? Because that's our purpose, to develop Krishna prema. So if that's not starting to awaken in people, there's something wrong. So has that started to awaken? And that can happen anytime because it's very mercy dependent, but generally it happens near the end of a Narta Nivritti. I mean, you can look at your progress. Do I just have faith, but I don't do anything about it as Anushraddha? Do I associate with devotees? Am I doing bhajana kriya? Have I taken initiation or am I aspiring towards it? Am I chanting 16 rounds? Am I offering my food? Am I reading the Shastra? That's all bhajana kriya. Am I following the four regular principles? That's the beginning of an arta nivritti. Am I starting to see the more subtle anarthas in my heart and let go of them? Am I feeling freedom from some of these more subtle anarthas? And then as my Staibhav with Krishna started to manifest, which generally it does near the end of an arta nivritti. And then am I experiencing taste for my service? And then am I experiencing attachment to Krishna? Not just taste for the service, but strong attachment to Krishna. And then we have, of course, the 9 symptoms of bhava, which we've already discussed in the Anubhava section, and then prema, where there's no more anartas at all. So that's a good idea of understanding. But if our Staibhav has not yet awakened, then whatever Sattvika bhavs we're experiencing are in a bus. And if our Staibhav has just started to awaken, we still might have some of these Sattvika bhavas to some degree as an abhasa and to some degree as the real thing. Like you can sometimes see both the shadow and the real thing at once, but we're probably just experiencing the Sattvika bhavs in a smoky state. It would only be at the higher stages where we're going to experience them in the really pronounced states. Is there a way to spot a practice acting expert? Um, Maybe not always in the moment. Just like I'm sure we've all seen dramatic performances where it really looked like the actors were experiencing those emotions. And If we didn't know that it was an actor in a play, we might think they were really the character. So uh, I think we've all been taken in by actors, and in fact, actors, that's their job. The job of the actors is to fool us into thinking that they're actually experiencing those emotions. Of course, sometimes actors will meditate on some corresponding emotion in their own life to bring out the physical symptoms, although they're not experiencing the emotion of the character they're portraying in the moment. It's really holistic. Like Prabhupada talks about people who will have a practice display and then go smoke a cigarette. When Prabhupada talks about professional reciters, he's not talking about whether or not somebody gets charity for their service. Not talking about that. We're supposed to give charity to the devotees. So that's not what he's talking about. But he's talking about someone whose only motivation is to impress people or make money. They're um, again, you have to look at holistically, and we can be fooled, and we can be fooled for some time. That's definitely a fact. It is even the residents of Vrindavan are fooled by demons who dress like devotees. Yes, Pulambasura and Vyomasura and Putana. So they fool even the Prema Bhaktas. We have the example in Chaitanya Lila where this devotee who had written poetry that was improper philosophically and full of improper mixing of rasas, that Swarup was the one who spotted the problem. He was the expert at spotting it, but the other devotees couldn't spot it. And they were going to Lord Chaitanya and saying, "Oh, this is so nice. You got to listen to this poetry." So I don't think we can always spot it. But the fact is that it does exist. At least we should know that it exists so that we don't automatically think that if somebody's fainting on the ground, oh, that must mean that they're in prema, because it's possible for it to be an abas and it's possible for it to be completely fake. So I think that's the point there. Is it important to determine if it is real or not? Um, it may be. It may be. If you're going to someone as an authority, you want to hear from them, and then you should certainly take the time, like you're supposed to examine the guru for a year. That should be enough time, usually. But again, we can be fooled. We are insignificant living entities. We can be fooled. If the residents of Vrindavan can be fooled, certainly we can be fooled. And we can be fooled in both directions. Like Gadadhar Pandit thought Pundarik Vijayanidhi was a materialist, and actually he was a great devotee. And of course, Gadadhar Pandit recognized Pundarik as a great devotee when Pundarik Vijayanidhi displayed the Sattvic bhavs. So when Pundarik Vijayanidhi heard the verses about Putana and started displaying the Sattvic bhavs, Gadadhar Pandit was like, "Oops, he's actually a great devotee. he's not a materialist." So sometimes we can think that someone who is a great devotee is not. Maharaj Rahugana did not recognize Jadabharata. And sometimes someone is just a rascal and will think that they're a great devotee. I have become convinced at this point in my life that I should stop thinking that I'm going to ever become so intelligent and have so much discrimination that I will never be fooled by anybody. I've just stopped trying to think that I'm going to be able to control material nature to the point that no one will ever bewilder me. I see people get very skeptical and very hard-hearted, assuming that everybody's a rascal and a cheater, and people go the other way, thinking everybody's a great devotee. You know, I'd like to focus on seeing the good in others and let Krishna sort it out, because I've messed up both ways. I've thought somebody was materialistic when they were actually an advanced devotee, and I've thought somebody was an advanced devotee and they were materialistic. And if Mother Yasoda is fooled by Putana, so maybe I shouldn't be so hard on myself. But at least we should know, so that we don't assume that anyone displaying these symptoms is a great devotee. And because devotees can conceal these symptoms, we should also not think that the absence of somebody going around crying and shaking and fainting means that they are a materialist. Okay, thank you very much. Tomorrow we're going to have part one of the Vyavichari Bhavs. Anything good in this presentation is from Srila Prabhupada, Srila Rupa Goswami, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Srila Jiva Goswami, our other acharyas in the Shastra. Any mistakes are mine. Please either correct or excuse the mistakes. Thank you again very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.